From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning. It's Friday, October 9th. You're listening to the Macrocast. This is Tony Fratto. I'm back in Washington, D.C., back at Hamilton Place Strategies headquarters, recording this morning. Pretty excited about that. Stacy Kerr from HPS is our special guest this morning. Really excited to have Stacy with us, my partner at HPS. John Fagan, Brendan Walsh with Markets Policy Partners. Guys, it's like, just a wild week, and with and Stacy, we all want to talk about where things are with the presidential campaign. We had a vice presidential debate this week. Trump and COVID and like the circus of stimulus talks. We definitely want to get into. Why don't we start with that VP debate, the plexiglass protected appearance the other night. The plexiglass kept out, I think it protected them from little germs, Stacy, like little bugs were not able to get through the plexiglass. But the fly was able to fly around the plexiglass.
You went there right off the top.
Right. I didn't want to wait.
Well, maybe the last time we see two candidates from the major, two of the major candidates on the stage together and that might have been the biggest news made. I don't think it was a big, no game changer, no big changes in the race from that VP debate. I think probably both sides had to do what they needed to do.
Yeah. Pence didn't. I don't know if it's possible for a vice president to win the election for the president. There was a view last time, 4 years ago, that Pence's debate with Kaine was a positive that gave a little boost to the Trump campaign when they needed it after his first disastrous debate last time. I don't think there was any recovering anything from the disastrous debate this time, was there?
No, and I think there was a little bit of hype of, is this Pence's performance for becoming a front runner in 2024, regardless of the the results of this election. If that's the measure, I don't think he met that. Yeah. But as far as moving the needle on this race, I think Kamala Harris did exactly as expected. She made the case on COVID. She held the vice president to account on it. The vice president did his best to turn away from it. Let's not let it pass that it was a little refreshing to see a tiny bit of civility back in our politics.
Normal.
I think everybody could just watch and relax for 90 minutes instead of.
I have to say, I know everyone's talking about the civility, and it was in the normal range of civility, and that's, and that's fine. And there was a little nostalgia for that too. At the same time, honestly, I was bored. And I was wondering, is there a setting for presidential debates that is somewhere between sleepy and maniacal, right? I just want something, can we get something in the middle, interesting, good, sharp exchanges.
Not this year.
Yeah, right.
You're going to look to the future for that one.
Okay. But it's in that's, we can set that aside. That's like an exhibition game, put it in the rearview mirror and move on. Where do you think the race is today?
Yeah, I think the big things that we've seen sort of progress over the last 2 weeks is really some numbers moving towards Biden, blocks of voters moving towards Biden. One big story this week was the money game as it relates to the presidential and as it relates to the Senate. And this is, for people that have been following politics for a long time, Democrats have not had a money advantage in politics.
It is waves of money.
I think it probably exceeded even the people that are organizing expectations.
I also feel like it's an underreported story. It might be the most important story, and people aren't talking about it enough.
I think it is because, John, I think it's got legs for maybe the number of Senate seats that we see, right? I think we've seen over the last couple of weeks, we had seen that numbers in states like Arizona, Mark Kelly up over Martha McSally in Arizona was starting to bring the Biden campaign up with it. Now we're seeing places like Alaska where the presidential is tied and this big money gush is putting money into a state like
Yeah,
Alaska,
the
where
states that we're talking about, we're talking about states we shouldn't be talking about. And I don't think it's, the head fake of last time, 2016, there was this view that, the Clinton campaign felt that they were winning. They had leads, the latest polls that they had around this time or earlier in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, they had, leads. They had what looked to be solid leads, and they wanted to broaden the battlefield, right? Go out to the Arizonas and some other states. So they ended up spending time and money in these states where there were stretches in 2016 that don't look like stretches today, not at all. And in fact, like the fact that we're even talking about Texas, Georgia, Kansas, Alaska is bizarre.
It is. If you look, we follow the Real Clear Politics. They do these averages of polls, and if you look right now, interesting thing, 11 toss-up states. So true toss-up states. The president is tied in only one of those, and that's Texas. So these people look at the averages of polls. So not just a off poll here and there, but really deep into the numbers. And so right now they have electoral math based on those averages. Biden 226, Trump 125, 187 electoral votes in those toss-ups. And and Biden's leading in all but Texas of that.
Yeah.
Very interesting what's going on in Texas too.
I was reading that in all the swing states, Biden has booked out primetime ads and is running and Trump isn't running any.
Well, actually, what we saw this week, right, was an increase in the Biden, back to the money. They've got the money to go on TV, not just for a head fake that Tony mentioned earlier, but they're up $6 million in Texas. That's real money. People watching Texas say $2 million in Texas moves your needle. So they're up $6 million. A lot of outside groups putting money into Texas now. I think there was reports in the last day of possibly sending Kamala Harris, Dr. Biden into Texas. Those are not head fakes. That says that those campaigns see real opportunity there. You have at the end of a campaign, you have your time and your money, your candidate's time and your money. And, you might put $500,000 or even $1 million somewhere to try to get the other side to spend money strategically. Yeah. If you're spending $6-8 million in Texas and you're sending your candidates there, that says that something is happening and that you sense real opportunity. And obviously Texas going for Biden would be the election. That would be.
That's crazy. That's
Democrats win in Texas.
Yeah. And they ought not to be spending a dime in Texas if they don't, to your point, not a dime in Texas if they don't feel pretty good about Pennsylvania. Yeah. Right? But even Ohio, right?
Well,
Ohio's in play.
But in John's point, not only are Democrats putting money into these states, but Trump campaign went dark in Ohio, right? Yeah. So they took money off, I think Ohio, I think Iowa, New Hampshire, places they won in 2016 and that they need to get to their electoral victory. They've taken those, they've taken their money out of there. That tells you two things: they sense trouble and they're out of money. Mm-hmm. And, I think if this was truly a billionaire candidate, he'd be dumping money in. And it was only 2 weeks ago that we got the Trump tax. You guys, a lot has happened.
Yeah, because I remember a month ago or a month and a half ago, basically when we're leading into it, the big thing where you can't rule out Trump is because he had such a big money advantage, and it just disappeared.
But I think there's also the Trump effect, which is he's not a traditional politician. There's a sense that the rules of traditional politics do not apply to Trump in the way that they apply to other candidates. The brutal money of the brutal logic of money politics, though, as you point out, is really a key factor. But there always is this, lurking in the background of all the pundits and all the pollsters and everybody's observation of the poll trends is this, but it's Trump. There's the supposed shy Trump voter who isn't coming out and being picked up in the polls. The sense that, the hearkening back to 2016 and comparing where Hillary Clinton was in the polling versus where Joe Biden is now, there are obviously differences, but there's no complacency that we're picking up on the Democrat side and on the pollsters and side. The place where we can see a little bit of complacency creeping in is actually in financial markets.
But also, not to be harsh, a lot of that shy Trump voter, a lot of them are dead. They died in the last 4 years, you know.
And we see where seniors have gone. I mean, seniors
and that's
have
the
made
most
a
important point.
Pretty explicit turn. You know, experts say, based on the handling of the coronavirus and not being able to
old people tend to vote for their self-interest, and Trump has said, you guys should die, take one for the team. That's not a great campaign.
Yeah, I think that John, to your point of the comparisons with 2016, I'd say one word difference between 2016, because it is interesting. If you look at the polls this week, the national polls this week, they're the same place that Hillary Clinton was in 2016. One word difference: incumbency. They know who he is now. 2016, they were willing to take a bet. And I think we've seen these blocks of voters that we talked about: seniors, women, suburban women, college educated whites. They're all moving. It's what we call in campaign politics breaking.
Yes.
And
but there was also,
now 4 years ago, we had the Comey report, which
that
was
is, I was just about to say that the October surprise, I know it's total speculation at this point, but it seems like a stretch to think that the Trump campaign won't do something in the last few weeks if they're in fact going to sit out the debates and the money advantage isn't there. Is there kind of a Comey-like October surprise that might be in the offing? I know this is just total speculation, but
there's a surprise every morning and afternoon right now. So
yes.
So
and unfortunately,
the governor of Michigan almost got kidnapped.
I mean, look, and especially with a look, I think the dynamics of this race are pretty clear. It's an incredibly stable race. You know, if you think about, like, relative to 4 years ago, you had a lot of voters who were casting about. You know, they weren't sure, even, you know, they were loosely attached to either, you know, Biden and Trump with each news break, whether it was the Access Hollywood tape or Comey's announcements, whatever it was. If you look back 4 years ago, you see up and down in the race. You see movement, and that tells you voters they're not sure, and they're, you know, maybe they'll think about this guy today, maybe they'll think about that guy tomorrow. The structure of this race, just from what you see from polling, is a very, very stable race.
Very
Biden
consistent.
has never been behind. He's never. This race has never been close, like never. Trump
and very small number of actual undecided voters.
And then so there's like a lot of attention to undecided voters, which, like, who are these people, right? But there are some of them.
Not many. There aren't many.
Not many. There just aren't enough. There aren't many of them. And if they split even, you know, if they split like 70-30 for Trump, that's probably not enough to close the gap, right? Which they're not going to do. Generally, they split 50-50 is what ends up, you know, happening. Maybe 60-40. You know, it's like that's not a huge, usually not a huge swing.
To the October surprise and what might we see, what could the Trump campaign do in the next 3 weeks? I think, you know, a couple of weeks ago we were here talking about all the scenarios of a tied election and what will happen. I think that's looking less likely. I mean, I think now there's some scenarios where we start to think about a 40-state election for Biden. But what can the Trump campaign do? I mean, I think you still have to look at voter protection. This is not my area of expertise, but how he could use the National Guard as it relates to ballots and election. I mean, there's some scary scenarios out there where, Trump in his desperation could inciting violence, the campaign inciting violence. Like you said, Brendan, with the governor of Michigan. I mean, these are serious things.
Like on election day, you know, the Proud Boys are probably going to be out intimidating people at certain polling places.
Yeah, so it won't be over until the votes are counted, but I think that's why you can see a continued push for early voting. And we did see huge numbers of early voting in states like Ohio this week. Mm-hmm. Early voting started and you saw people standing in line like you usually see on election day. So again, another indication of the enthusiasm, whether it's for Democrats or anti-Trump, there is definitely enthusiasm to vote against.
So Stacey, let me ask you, if we do get a huge Biden win, do you think we know on election day?
Well, this is exactly where I wanted to go to, because I could tell you for the past few weeks, the question I was getting from especially from investors and others and a lot of our clients is, what happens if if the election is contested and we don't know, and how long it goes on, and what do we do about that? The way the polls have broken over the past 10 days, it seems to me like that may be less of a concern.
I agree.
And I think I get a sense from, what I hear from people in the markets, that they're less concerned about it too,
Yeah. Brendan, I still think a state to watch early is Florida. Florida counts their absentee ballots ahead of election day.
Okay, they do. That's important.
They do.
Yeah.
And so, and the polls close. So in the 10, 11 o'clock hour, we should be getting an indication. Now, Florida is also a state that has stayed certainly within the margin of error and very, very, and tied. So I don't think we may know on election night there on Florida.
Because I think Pennsylvania won't you can't start counting until after, but Pennsylvania might not matter, I guess. Yeah. Right.
And especially if we start seeing things out of places like Texas.
Yes, exactly.
If we see a Georgia break,
this is a question, Stacy, is, again, you wonder if maybe this doesn't matter at all. Maybe they are just, truly at the saturation point of what they can spend. But do you spend $6 million in Texas when you know Florida wins the election for you?
I think if you look behind the numbers and some of the motivation, I think some of these states, like Tony won, like the South Carolina Senate race, right? Jamie Harrison and Lindsey Graham, high attention. I think it's easy to say tied race, Lindsey Graham very vulnerable. But if you still look at the demographics in some of these states, the demographics are going to, there's not enough there to show that could become a 52-48. Mm-hmm. It's going to require Republicans to go vote for Jamie Harrison. Texas but Texas has those demographic changes. Yeah. It's been happening. A lot of people thought it might happen in 4 years. I mean, Beto O'Rourke has been on the ground specifically doing voter registration of voters who have been purged from the rolls. I mean, there's a lot of things going on with the types of young people that are moving into Texas. So I think to answer that, Tony, I'd say if you look at the demographics between Florida, they're far more stable with seniors and blocks of voters, and far more unknown in Texas. And you have that money advantage. You can go put some money behind it and see what those new demographics will yield.
Yeah.
Hey, actually, I wonder if we look back, if eliminating the state and local tax deduction ended up hurting Republicans because it pushed blue voters into red states.
Well, though, I mean, we'll see, right? There's going to be,
and we won't know for a decade, but just thinking out loud.
Yeah,
there are stories that have benefited people moving into Pennsylvania, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I knew a ton of people that just moved. They were in southern Jersey and they just moved over the border. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but October surprise might actually be congressional action. What do you guys think?
Let's find out. Let's take a break here and then come back. I want to talk about where we think what this means for the never-ending circus of the stimulus talks. You're listening to the HPS Macrocast.
Have you heard the news? The HPS Macrocast is expanding into the HPS Podcast channel, which offers our listeners access to all of Hamilton Place Strategy's podcast shows in one convenient place. The HPS Podcast channel is home to all of our new and past podcast episodes on your favorite podcast streaming services: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google, and more. If you're already subscribed to the HPS Macrocast, do nothing. If you aren't, subscribe now to have weekly HPS Macrocast episodes and the latest from HPS Insights delivered straight to your podcast streaming service. To learn more about our podcasts and other original content, visit hamiltonplacestrategies.com/insights.
All right, back on the Macrocast. There's I don't know if you guys saw it, but Jake Sherman from Politico did a rant about these wacky analysts in Wall Street, Wall Street is stupid because they keep, expecting that there's going to be a stimulus when there's not going to be a stimulus. And I'm going to forgive Wall Street investors for guessing as to whether there is or isn't going to be a stimulus, because, the up and down circus that we've had here on stimulus talks over the past few weeks is enough to confuse anyone. If you've been listening to the Macrocast, we've been talking about it, but here we are again. And, Trump gave Democrats the greatest gift they could have asked for, which is he tweeted a shutdown of the stimulus talks that Speaker Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin had been conducting, the fitful talks, but he shut it down, which was a gift to Democrats because now they get to go around the country and say, President Trump doesn't care. He shut down the stimulus talks. But now he's back, and not only not wanting, not just a little bill. Now we find out this morning he wants a grand, big, giant bill. Stacey, what do you think we're going to get, if anything?
Here we'll see. I think in all of the ping ponging, Tony, that you talked about, the president tweeting to shut it down, then he came right back and said he wanted something, as you said. I think what we also saw out yesterday was, Pelosi publicly saying she does not want relief just for airline workers or small skinny pieces of this, that she still wants these as in negotiations with a big bill. Start to watch the clock here. I think the Senate is out until October 19th. Mitch McConnell's number 1, number 2, and number 3 priority is a Supreme Court justice. That doesn't mean he can't do both, but we're starting to get into uncertain territory with senators who can actually show up to vote. That's not nothing with having several of them have gotten corona. So I still see small chance for action over the next couple of weeks. But I think it won't be, I take Pelosi at her word that it won't be without a big bill.
John Brennan, what do you think? First of all, I think there's been like way too much, playing over, what Wall Street, is expecting from Washington, as though it's big. And I see things like, my friend Ben White, tweeting the other day that, the market tanked on the news that the talks were happening. And I looked at the market and was like, I don't know, it was like down 0.43%. Like, that's not a tank. That's like, and it's probably had nothing to do with stimulus. Like, what is going on?
Well, we did see a reflexive sell-off on Tuesday in the afternoon. The market was up smartly, and we saw that one-day intraday drop when President Trump tweeted that he was pulling out of stimulus negotiations. From top to bottom. And that intraday move for the S&P 500 was 2%, which is not a teeny tiny move, but certainly in the context of where we are, which is heading back toward all-time highs. The market has been rallying pretty significantly over the last couple of weeks. That was really just a divot here in the road, and the market quickly corrected its directionality as even before President Trump expressed what is clearly an acute case of bluffer's remorse here in the stimulus negotiations. The market recalibrated their viewpoint relatively quickly, which was, if we don't get stimulus now, we'll just get it after the election. And it's not that long to wait. It may not be optimal, but the polls were also heading in a direction that has been signaling to market participants that fiscal stimulus upside is increasingly possible with under the blue wave Democrat sweep. Then, your worst case scenario is we get, post-election, a 1.6 trillion bill, which is still very considerable. And the best case scenario in terms of stimulus is the Democrats sweep, you wait until February and you get 3.4 trillion. So that's, a kind of win-win scenario for markets in terms of fiscal stimulus. They just elongated their timeline for when this stimulus would actually occur. And certainly the polls have been going in favor of Biden. That is, the typical Wall Street preference for the GOP. Low tax, low regulatory environment is very different this time. The concerns really were centered, as we've discussed again and again, the concerns have been centered around the process of the election. The worst case scenario of political risk for market participants is a long, disputed, drawn out, accompanied by civic unrest, litigated nightmare constitutional crisis that drags on and on. That's the kind of thing that really is going to fuel market volatility and downside for risk assets. A clear-cut result either way really is something that the market would think of as something of a relief. And the clarity, at least the appearance of clarity that the polls are beginning to show, is boosting market spirits. And you can see this Biden bump. It's not just, speculation. You can see the solar stocks ETF, the clean energy ETFs. These are going bananas to the upside right now. And that's pretty clearly a bet on this blue wave election. And I think that our discussion previously, and Stacy, your focus on the Senate is that key aspect, and something that probably a lot of market participants are missing, which is, if the Senate really does stay Republican, then a Biden administration policy outlook is going to be very, very different than a true blue wave where both houses of Congress and the White House go to the Dems.
Yeah, John, the other thing to watch is really, as we talked about in the previous segment, the numbers in the Senate. So if we do see a Biden administration and a Democratic Senate, if we have a one or two vote seat majority in the Senate, could be very different than picking up states like Kansas now, or, picking up one of the Georgia seats. And that will have an effect on what a Biden administration policy agenda would be, how much of a governing majority you have there. And, as we have said before, that get ready, because 2022 comes quickly, and there's going to be a very small window where the Biden administration can go get legislation passed, because there's going to be a number of senators who are now up for re-election in 2022 that will create a dynamic there
by
as
the
well.
way,
So you do
the
really...
map is not great for Republicans in the Senate in 2022 either.
Yeah, so it's all of these things I think will determine the
which is to say, Stacy, that it's you may look to see reluctance of if markets are looking at what the policy environment is going to be, they may be reluctant to see a much more ambitious road ahead for Democrats if they have unified control. But unified control might not be the usual 2-year cycle, might be a 4-year cycle for them, because it's, like I said, it's a challenging map for Senate Republicans in 2022.
Yeah, it could be. And then, to state the obvious, the uncertainty of President Trump. I mean, we sometimes joke about it. We've seen it. I do believe that it is a factor in anything getting passed in the Senate, because Mitch McConnell needs to know, if he's going to put something on the floor, that the president will sign it. And the type of erratic behavior that we saw this week from the president, there is no guarantee from President Trump until it actually happens. And so there's a lot to weigh for McConnell also, to put something on the floor and then to not have the president change his mind. So that factor alone makes me, a little bit more pessimistic on a deal happening in the next 25 days.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely. I mean, again, like we could be surprised and have a giant, agreement that they're going to try to jam the Senate with, like this afternoon. Who knows, right? Crazy stuff seems to happen every day. But I think I'm very skeptical of that as well. I agree with you. I think that's really unlikely to happen. I think it's unlikely that anything gets done before Election Day. The biggest reason is, first of all, we should all state there is a very strong economic need for this stimulus package. It should have happened, 2 months ago. So, like, let me stipulate, the money is needed, the stimulus is needed. There are real needs for it. That doesn't mean that Congress always, does the right thing, and I think they're not doing the right thing now. I also don't think that from a political standpoint, there's much to gain for Republicans to just pass a bill right now. They would need the money to actually get into people's, checking accounts and, get their unemployment checks and the PPP money and, schools and everything else that would have, probably supercharged this economy. From a political standpoint, I've told these guys they should get those, like when when you go to the ball game and they have those air guns that shoot T-shirts into the crowd. They should get those air guns and shoot cash. That's what they should be doing from a political standpoint and an economic standpoint. Get like cash guns that just shoot cash into the crowd. That's what they ought to be doing.
The money earlier this year, I mean, the money got out quick. It was the fastest that money has ever gotten out, but we're still not talking about that being able to happen before the election, even if they passed something right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So that's why I think what my best guess is a skinny stimulus, not even a stimulus package, a little bit of rescue of, money for airlines, maybe some, plus up on UI, maybe some education money. To help schools, get kids back to school, not a big plan, just something that you can get through the Senate in a post-election environment where maybe they have lost control of the Senate, are expecting to lose control of the Senate, and then Senate Republicans say, Democrats, if you want to go past a wasteful multi-trillion dollar plan, you do that on your watch in February, not on our watch. And that's kind of what I expect to happen. But to John's point, it's coming. It's coming.
I guess the one other scenario would be, as John was talking about, if there is presidential results uncertainty, whether that comes electorally or the Trump campaign initiates something. But if we are in some of these scenarios where we're still counting votes or recounting or doing some of these things, Tony, is that going to be possible? I mean, can Congress act in a lame duck with that environment going on the presidential side? I mean,
I'm trying to think of what I will put my money on. Can I put my money on? I think nothing is a sure bet in the lame duck. To me, nothing is a sure thing in the lame duck. Eventual federal economic support, fiscal support is a sure thing. I think it's a sure thing before the end of February of 2021. But anything can happen in during lame duck, and I'm not sure what happens there. Hey, why don't we let's take our last break and come back, and I want to talk an oldie but goodie, because we have something we haven't addressed in a long time. We haven't talked about Brexit forever, but we have a Brexit big date coming up. Let's come back to that after the break.
Check out HPS Insights, a regular podcast from Hamilton Place Strategies, bringing you the latest on policy debates affecting the business and political communities. Available on your favorite streaming platforms, including Apple, Spotify, and Google. Tune in to the latest episodes and learn more at hamiltonplacestrategies.com/podcast.
All right, we're back on the Macrocast. We'll take a look at Brexit, but John, we don't always get news from Fed minutes. The minutes came out on Wednesday, and there was some news in there on asset purchases, weren't there?
Yeah, that's it was a really key point. It came out at such a time when the news cycle was being bombarded by all this fiscal stimulus drama and back and forth, and obviously the West Wing COVID cluster and the vice presidential debate. And the minutes came out on Wednesday afternoon, and they didn't really say anything specific about asset purchases, but just the fact that they featured a reference to them, and that the idea that in future meetings it will be appropriate to further assess and communicate how the committee's asset purchase program could best support its objectives. This was the fact that the September policy pivot really focused on interest rates staying at zero from now until, way over the horizon, 2023, 2024. The one thing that they really didn't talk about was how asset purchases could play into this. And that was a source of some of the market disappointment. And the idea that if the Fed needs to do more to achieve these more ambitious targets, and zero interest rates are kind of set it and forget it, well, you're left with more aggressive asset purchases. And that's what the minutes, they didn't say anything definitive, but they hinted at it. And Chicago Fed President Evans is out today talking about how asset purchases might be needed if the recovery is slower. This is music to the ears of risk assets. Quantitative easing is is viewed as rocket fuel for risk asset prices, for stock prices. And in a scenario when the Fed has been putting their marker down, as clear as they could possibly say that more fiscal stimulus is needed, this delay is opening the door for them to say, well, now asset purchases are really our best option for coming into the breach if fiscal stimulus is delayed. And so we're beginning to see this rhetorical build up here for the Fed, and it's still quiet, but we think it's going to build in intensity. And certainly if there is a long disputed post-election recount nightmare process, then expect the Fed to be much more voluble about their intention to start doing quantitative easing in much greater quantum than they are right now.
So, I mean, and so this, look, I mean, I know we spent a lot of time talking about fiscal stimulus, but we should not forget just how the guidance and action that we're getting from the Fed is still pretty powerful, and markets are still looking largely to what the Fed is doing, right?
Oh, absolutely. And this combination of fiscal stimulus with a augmented asset purchase program, the combined coordinated, it's not overtly coordinated, but from Wall Street, you could certainly be forgiven for thinking that it is that coordinated. It looks kind of like, what we've talked about, modern monetary theory light, deficit monetization, and that tends to depress the dollar and lift risk asset prices, among other things.
Well, I think we're going to spend a lot more time on that as we go forward. But so Brexit, real quick, get a Brexit. They're supposed to get a trade deal on Monday. Is that going to happen?
Prime Minister Johnson appears to be, incrementally abandoning his self-imposed October 15th deadline. The European negotiators appear to be perfectly happy to call the bluff of the UK negotiators, and the threats to walk away from the table have just not been taken seriously. The UK's threats to walk away from the table haven't been taken seriously by the EU. We shall see, but it's certainly, all indications are that this negotiation will continue past the 15th. There's a large scale European leaders summit at the end of next week. We certainly don't expect a deal to be cemented before then. Our base case on the sticking points, they've just made so little progress on things like fishery rights and fishing rights and the Northern Ireland conundrum that it's really hard to see, and the chief negotiators themselves have really despaired of the ability to reach a consensus compromise on this. The UK's chief negotiator, Lord Frost, said that the fishing rights dispute may be impossible to bridge, and I think a lot
of this is impossible to bridge, and it's like, I mean, I know, like, we have to keep dealing with the reality of Brexit, and it's gonna be interesting to still see how they try to work out some of these things. I don't see how they fix them. This was a mess to begin with, and it remains a mess.
Yeah, there may be something in between, absolutely hard, no deal, hard crash out Brexit and a perfectly agreed, tied up with a bow kind of deal. There's probably some sort of gray area in the middle, which is likely where we'll land, where they agree on what they can agree with. And then, some of the other things are left, but it ends up dragging on so long that it's a very disjointed process. But that to us looks more like hard Brexit than a neat and tidy agreement.
Yeah.
So it sure looks like a mess. The pound, though, which has been a barometer of the fortunes of Brexit, is doing fine against the dollar, but that's only because the dollar is plumbing multi-year lows. If you look at the pound versus the euro, it certainly seems to indicate that the balance of power in this negotiating relationship is going increasingly against the UK.
Yeah, definitely. All right. The last thing I want to leave with before we exit for the weekend, Stacy, like we're supposed to get a second presidential debate. We're going to get one next week.
Who knows?
I want everyone's predictions. We get an in-person debate. Do we get one? And then if we do, is it in person or virtual?
I don't see how the Presidential Debate Commission gets bullied into reversing. They said that they were not going to go, that they wanted to do virtual. It's hard to think just because the president screamed that they go back to an in-person debate. So
well, he did get a note from his doctor. Permission. He got a permission.
Released to the media. Right. So I think we'll see a debate, and I do not think it will be in person.
I think that's probably a good bet. I think when all the shouting is over, that's what we'll end up with, is a virtual debate. And then the question is, does the moderator get a mute button? Get to use the mute button?
Well, this is supposed to be a town hall debate.
Well, that's true.
So that's factoring into President Trump. That's a place where Vice President Biden exceeds or excels. So we'll see.
We'll see. All right, guys. Great Macrocast. Great to see you all. Stacy, thanks for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me.
We'll all be back together soon enough, I'm sure. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share. Find more from Hamilton Place Strategies at hamiltonplacestrategies.com and follow Tony Fratto on Twitter @TonyFratto. Learn more about John Fagan, Brendan Walsh, and the work they do at Markets Policy Partners by visiting marketspolicy.com.